Um, put your questions in the chat as we go, and we'll try to catch up on things. And let me introduce these three absolutely phenomenal presenters for us. Jose Pablo Quinones is a passionate lawyer for social transformation through human rights education for young people. He's president of a local organization and the national vice president for the National Front for Peace Network that promotes peace in Mexico and combats hate speech. He's part of the World Global Shapers Network of the World Economics Forum and a permanent partner of the youth program of the Permanent Secretariat of the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates and an alumnus of the International Visitor Leadership Program that's part of the U.S. State Department Office of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Trey Sheridan and Olivia Turner have lived and attended school in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, USA community. Events throughout the U.S. caused them to look at what was happening at home. They will tell you about their respective journeys and their current roles as board members of DICE, Diversity and Inclusion for Community Empowerment, a local group founded by Cleone Mainville and Susie Robinson, who are now serve as co-presidents. You, the audience, are encouraged to engage in an important conversation about the role of young leaders in shaping policy and public opinion, indeed in setting the directions that we will follow for the next decades. So, Jose, if you'd like to begin, that would be great.
Thank you so much, Francis. Hi, everyone. Sorry, maybe my connection is very unstable. So, because I am not in my home, I'm from Mexico, but I'm currently in Chicago, in a vacation trip. But I am in Starbucks, and we are a lot of people now. So the connection is very stable. Sorry for that. I'm gonna turn off my camera if it's this is for me. I think that could be improve the connection. So I'm gonna share my my screen now to presentation presentation our work as a human rights organization. Wait a second, please. Okay. Well, as we as you mentioned, Francis, and everyone, I'm Jose Pablo. I'm president of the nonprofit organization called Jornada de Derechos Humanos, based in the southeast of Mexico. We are a nonprofit organization focused in human rights education on youth. Since the point of view to fight against misinformation in the human rights education. We are independent, no partisan, and very and a very important thing that we always have believed in the multidisciplinary organization. Our point of view to peace building and to teach human rights to the youth people is in the multidisciplinary way, not just in the law way or point of view. We are since 2013 we are focused on education. We have 15 cultural projects. Our main goal to fight Mexico. How? Through human rights education. In specific, in the southeast of Mexico, because we have a specific our region is a very usually has been considered a peaceful region in Mexico in comparison of the rest of Mexico. So we have been creating a conscience in the youth people for the importance of the to be participant in the solutions of the issues in human rights problems in youth people and in general in our people in Mexico. We have three programs. We have the Voices for Education program. That is our permanent program on education in human rights in youth. Our second program is our annual summit conference. It's big spaces with big audiences, with the most important leaders in the world and in Latin America to have a secure space to discuss human rights with youth people. And our third program is networking. Our networking program, how making audiences with other organizations that work human rights education, particularly in the youth human rights, in the people who has been who has missed historically in Mexico. Today I want to talk in a specific one of our main projects now, that its name is Resistance Mission project, Misión Resistencia in Spanish. It's a training project that we are working with in the southeast of Mexico. And why resistance mission project? Why the name? The name because we consider that in Mexico, to resisting has always been a challenge before not just before the pandemic or during the pandemic, and will be after the pandemic. Has been always a mission to resist in Mexico in the terms of poverty, inequality, violence, corruption, impunity, etc., and other issues in Mexico. So we are training the Resistance Mission project. It's a training project to create skills in human rights, in a specific with youth, indigenous people, or in our youth people living in violent or conflict zones in the southeast of Mexico. How is our strategy? Is to provide information to them, and also to create community projects with the indigenous people, youth people. This is a kind of this is an pictures from our sessions to training youth indigenous people in Mexico. This is an hybrid project. We have online sessions and also face-to-face sessions currently. Also, it's a project. This is a school of medicine in the south of Yucatan, Mexico. This project is contemplated it's contemplating all kind of profiles of youth indigenous people, rural indigenous people, farmer youth people, and indigenous youth people that have very different point of views, and is working with the and why resistance mission project, because the southeast of Mexico, this including the Yucatan Peninsula and Chiapas state and Oaxaca, have the most population indigenous in our country. The indigenous in our country, particularly the youth, has been missing by historically, and we found it an opportunity to end the social gaps through this project in our area. How we have in common, what we have in common in this area, in specific issues with our Mayan indigenous youth people: discrimination, dispossession of land on territory, and inequality, crime and violence, and poverty, and in specific in the urban cities in Quintana Roo, like Cancun, Tulum, and it's very important for us to contribute to end these gaps in the youth people in this area that also are youth indigenous people. And I want to finish. I want to share all other example of our work that we have been doing since 2013. We have created and a very strongest network in human rights education, in peace building since 2013 in Mexico, with the most important human rights activists in Mexico and Latin America. This is an example of our free events and conferences that I have made in the past. And actually these human rights activists are helping us in the resistance mission project to to uh, to uh, to to support the youth people, to youth indigenous people, through we have made different events with security issues, impunity issues in Mexico, education issues, citizen participation, obviously indigenous people in 2019. We are working very hard with more than 100 social activists and the most important organizations around the world in Latin America. And also our organization believes in human rights and a strategy, as I said, as a multidisciplinary way. This way is very strongest in the cultural way, and this is a picture in our last big conference in November 2019, before the pandemic. Um, uh, and speakers from what in our country are affecting in a very important way, mostly in a country with a lot of corruption and Mexico is the most dangerous country in the world to be a journalist, and through my experience, sorry, I lost my connection. And I will say that the main goal in the human rights education and peace building in our country and in our organization is, as I said, to fight against fake news in Mexico, and to 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 empower the youth people to see the other points of view, that the things are possible, and the things can't change in our country, and sometimes we have discovered that the youth people just need information to create projects, to fight, to be an activism, and yeah, I think that it's all for me, and I also thank you so much the for the alumni Rotary Propass fellowships for the invitation, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hold the questions until after the second presentation, and then we'll open it for discussion with the whole group. Okay, so Trey and Olivia, it's all yours.
Great, yeah, I'll share in a second. All right, can everybody see that all right? I'm assuming so. Yeah, so thank you everybody for being here. I guess I can start by saying that, especially the Rotary, Peace Organization, for having us. Obviously, this is such an important stage, and it's so impactful, and it means a lot. It's very humbling for us to be here, because Olivia and I have been in this space for about a year, and the people in the audience who know me are probably sick of this little spiel that I do, but with how crazy the past year has been, I truly just try to be mindful and thankful for people's time. And so it's really awesome that you have all taken the time to be here with us today and to hear our message, and really just want to express gratitude for that. So I guess we can get it underway without further ado. My name's Trey Sheridan.
And I'm Olivia Turner. Hi.
Yeah, so this is just a bit of contact information. I know Fran talked about each of us a little bit at the top, but just to sort of reiterate, Olivia and I have been in this space for about a year now, working alongside DICE in sort of our youth leadership program. By, I guess, profession, you could say I'm a trained chemical engineer, and sort of where my passion lie is in a communication, I guess you could say. I think that a lot of people see sort of social justice work and in the arts as being distinctly separate from something like engineering and math. But I think that to be a good engineer and to be a good person and a good functioning member of society, you need communication, you need solutions. And so that's what sort of drew me to the social justice work that we've been doing with DICE. And I don't know, Olivia, if you had anything to sort of add to that. But.
Yeah, I guess I took I view I view this work in kind of the entirely opposite perspective as you do. And working with DICE actually made me change what I wanted to do in life as a whole. And I ended up switching my major to criminal justice and political science. And I want to work specifically with reforming the American criminal justice system and making that more of an equal opportunity platform for all people in America.
Yeah, right. And so just to talk a little bit about our agenda, what we'll be talking about, just a brief sort of introduction to DICE, who we are. I know like Fran introduced us a little bit at the top, but we'll talk about ourselves a little bit so that we're not complete strangers talking to you. And then we'll talk about some of our youth-led events and why we feel as though we're a success story of implementing sort of youth creativity into the diversity, equity, inclusion space. And then we'll talk about building youth leadership and what we think in our experience over the past year has allowed us to be successful. And we'll talk about some different programs and maybe even some do's and don'ts on sort of things that we found work with working with youth and some of the things that don't work when working with youth. And we'll sort of recap that all. But yeah, just to sort of start, who are we? As Fran mentioned at the top, we're DICE, which is Diversity and Inclusion for Community Empowerment. And I think the name sort of speaks for itself. We try to uphold and you know, bring issues of discrimination and bring those sort of to light. And we kind of operate in a couple of different spheres that I'll talk about sort of briefly here before we get into sort of our actual projects. So we do a lot of sort of public education support. The youth group hasn't been as intensely involved with this, but we have a lot of wonderful board members that look at things like MCAS scores, which is like a standardized testing score in our school system. So we do a lot of sort of, like you said, public education support. And that's just to promote cultural compassion and diversity so that students feel accepted and included, educators are supported, and administrators are equipped to foster a learning environment for all to succeed. The second sort of thing that we sort of operate in, which I've had to sort of take a crash course on over the past year, was local government participation. And local government participation is hugely important. If it's not evident by sort of the name, obviously the local governments, your town councils, your school committees impact what you do on a day-to-day basis in ways that I don't think I was previously as aware of. And at DICE, we try to really sort of bring a diversity, equity, and inclusion scope to local government participation. So we serve as a communication and connection point to help understand the priorities of local government. And then have initiatives that pertain to diversity and inclusion and how residents can learn and actively participate through attendance and volunteerism. So that's really important to us. And then obviously member empowerment is a big thing. We want to be able to provide spaces. We want to be an inclusive group, and we want to be able to challenge ourselves and each other, exchange ideas, feel empowered to execute on our ideas, and mobilize in positive ways in our community. And then obviously community engagement. We don't want to be an entity that's sort of just floating and only talking with the community leaders. We want to really be engaged with our community. And so that's sort of DICE as a whole. And how Liv and I fit into this, how do the youth fit into this? There's 12 board members at DICE, acting board members at DICE, 4 of which are youth. And I'd encourage you to stop and think about that a little bit, because I think it's a unique situation in that we're really at the table. We're active participants at DICE. We are board members. We show up to board meetings with an equal vote. My vote counts just as much as Cleone's vote. The president of our organization counts just as much as our marketing directors. We share an equal voice and vote in this organization. It's not as though we show up on the day of events to, you know, sort of show the community, oh, that we have youth involved. It's very much a process where we're here throughout and we're planning throughout. And I think that hearing us talk about some of our projects, that'll really shine through. But yeah, I just really want to kind of stress that because I think it's important, and the youth voice is very important as we'll hear and talk about. yes, we'll get into some of our youth-led events.
Yeah, like Trey said, a big one that we did with specifically the youth, like this was very much youth-led and a very big youth idea, was our candidate debate event. We basically we felt as though there was a disconnect between like the youth of our town and the government officials of our town. And we felt like a lot of the kids didn't really know what board meetings were, or like who these candidates were. And there was a big disconnect between like what we wanted to see and who and what people actually knew. So our main goal was to moderate a debate amongst candidates for elected town positions in an effort to facilitate and ease communication between the youth community and elected officials. So as the youth, we kind of just sat down and planned this whole project, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to really communicate directly with our candidates and make it very, very easy for the youth in our town and just everybody in our town to really see like what each candidate is really about and what they stand for, so they have a more informed position on everything. Specifically, the youth involvement in this was we communicated with candidates, we developed the debate questions, we coordinated event logistics, promoted advertisements, and moderated the discussion. And some of the outcomes were we made 2 successful sessions with 50 attendees each. We did one with town council and mostly that, and then another one specifically with the school committee, because we thought that affected the youth too a lot. This also gave candidates a no-cost platform to get their message out, which I feel like people often don't really think about. A lot of the candidates would not be able to run or like have their name known or like even be seen as like a potential actual candidate without a way to kind of get their message out. And this was a way, like it was free. They didn't have to have money down. They didn't have to pay or do anything. They could just come here, join, and just talk with us. And I think that was a really inclusive way to get everybody kind of involved. It also informed community members in regards to local government. So again, a lot of people didn't really understand how Bridgewater was run as a town, or like who was in charge of what. So I think that that really informed everybody and kind of made everything more transparent to the regular community. This also garnered interest from BTV, which is a local television network for us. And they wanted regular programming with us. So that was a really good way, like the youth kind of stepped out into the community as their own and was able to like kind of get their voices out there. We also gained additional respect from town leaders, and I think it elevated DICE's profile as an organization because everybody saw us doing this, and I guess a lot of people were kind of drawn in when before they might have been hesitant to really look into us. It was a very easy way to get a lot of people involved in what we were doing without kind of being like, oh, sign up for this. Like you kind of just could go and see what was going on. It attracted a lot of attention, and it made candidates want to do future events with us. So I guess that kind of promotes transparency in the town as a whole, because if somebody doesn't show up to an event, like why weren't they there? It makes things very, very transparent, like who's believes in what, and it helps the town members and citizens as a whole just kind of get to know the town officials on a more personal level than they would have probably before with just lawn signs or something like that. So we can go on to the next slide, and some primary takeaways about that is like, I felt like DICE really saw the youth as true partners, and that allowed us to like bring fresh ideas to the table, because maybe a debate event like this probably wouldn't have been thought of, or like, especially on Zoom, like it's not a typical everyday thing to hear. So I think that that was a big thing. If you see the youth as like equal partners with you, it's much more likely to bring like new ideas that you might have not have thought of. Also, the way that DICE provided structure and support without taking over was a really big thing that I think that you should keep in mind when including youth voices. They were there, and they were always there if we needed them, but they didn't tell us how to run things, and they kind of gave us all to us to figure it out. And then once we needed their help, they were very, very clear and open with us to like make sure that we knew what we could kind of talk about. So yeah, it was like, it gave us our chance to use our voices, but it didn't overpower us, and we didn't feel like we didn't have a say in what was going on. They were just kind of there if we needed them, but they didn't like take anything over, and I think that's really important. Also, I think a big thing that was learned was that relationships with the youth can be used to promote events and increase participation. I feel like adults kind of usually drift to Facebook or stuff like that, and I feel like the youth can kind of bring a new wave into that. I know that I promoted it on my Snapchat, Instagram, stuff like that. And I think that if you want youth to participate in something and you want youth to come, it's really, really beneficial to have youth marketing that. And it's like one thing for a peer to communicate with another one of their peers, or like an adult being like, you have to come to this, you should come to this. It kind of just brings a new level of interest to the youth community, and maybe new ways to market that adults may have not have thought of. But yeah, and then another.
Oh, sorry, did I step on your feet, Liv? My bad.
No, I was just gonna tell you to talk. Go ahead.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so like Liv was talking about the candidate event, that was awesome. That was a great one. And just to sort of add something to that, I mean, really, that was really all us on that. It was kind of an event that we pulled together, and that was, you know, it was really, I was proud of ourselves for being able to accomplish that in that space. Another event that where we ran, this one happened prior to the candidates event, was the community listening event. And so what was the community listening event? I guess it kind of makes sense to sort of start at the beginning. And what was our purpose for having a listening event? What is even the purpose of that? And really the purpose was that we kind of decided to look inward at our community, the Bridgewater-Rainham community in Massachusetts. And what we realized was that we have a problem with discrimination on the basis of race, on the basis of sexuality, and otherwise. We knew that there were situations of discrimination that were going unchecked. And there were people who were having traumatic experiences in our town, our next door neighbors, our peers, even some of our leaders. We knew that they were having these semi-traumatic experiences to know nothing was happening as a result of it. And we felt as though that wasn't right. And the very least that we could do was spotlight those stories and make sure that those sorts of things couldn't happen to other people again. And obviously it's not a perfect system, and that's hard, but I think it's a great first step. And so the goal of our this event was to collect stories of impact regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of a larger effort to raise awareness and support surrounding incidents of discrimination in our community. And so the way that we sort of took that on was, okay, you know, what's the best way to do this? Okay, we can collect stories. We can collect stories from people in our community that experience these traumatic events. And if we can get them to share, and we can bring these stories to the right people, maybe the right people can have the sort of power to make a difference in this situation, which is great. But then we were sort of thinking, you know, these stories, they're around. The fact that we knew about them is evidence that other people knew about them. People in power knew about some of these stories. And something that we were realizing that was happening is that these stories were being brought up. They were being brought to places like administration, in the school systems, and the people who were going through these traumatic events were told, you know, that's just sort of an anecdotal story. That's something that's, you know, just happening this once. That's not who we are as a community. And, you know, it kind of pointed the finger back at the people who were being discriminated against. And because of the lack of support and lack of structure in that system, the people who were having these sort of traumatic events didn't really have an outlet. When they went to who they thought could make a difference and nothing was done about the situation, there was sort of this pushback and this sort of giving up sort of attitude, which is obviously unacceptable. And so sort of what we did is, okay, we'll collect all these stories. We'll have 60 around stories, what was what we ended up collecting eventually. And you can't ignore that. And to sort of give ourselves even more proof that there is a problem in our community, we did a quantitative survey along with the collection of stories. So that was 7 to 8 questions, pretty much just asking quantitative questions. How inclusive do you feel the Bridgewater-Rainham community is? And the responses, it was like a multiple choice, and you could strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree for 1 through 8 questions. And I suppose that's where I can sort of get into the youth involvement with this project, which was, as I was talking about earlier, from the ground up, we were involved in this. The initial meeting for this was started as really actually kind of a small thing in Blossom, but the initial meeting was between myself and another wonderful board member that we have at DICE, woman named Pam. And we sat down and we sort of had this idea. We had we want to do these quantitative questions, we want to collect stories. What do we do? And that was sort of the meeting. And we talked through that, and leaving that meeting, we kind of had an idea of what we wanted to do, but it was my job to create that survey. And it was my job to draft these notes on anonymity and pretty much assuring our audience that they were going to have a safe space. And that was entirely youth-led, that first stage of that. I created the entire survey. I drafted, you know, the safe environment statements, the anonymity statements, all that. It was all entirely youth-led. And this is not to say that I was left on my own. Afterwards, we came back as a group in tandem with another group in town called BCCR. And we went through the survey and we really nailed out some of like the details, that sort of thing. And you got it into its final form, but it was youth-led from the beginning. And I think something that Liv sort of touched about at the end of her last slide was that I was super proud of our ability to facilitate community outreach with this project. I'm proud to say that of the, I think, almost 200 respondents of this survey, about 50% of them were 24 years old and younger, which I think speaks to the youth group, there's 4 of us, our ability to pitch that out to our different grassroots avenues. I was posting on Twitter, I posted it on my Snapchat. I have some friends who are more outgoing and extroverted than I am. They have thousands of followers on all their different social media platforms. And I said, hey, can you post this on your platform and maybe, you know, get this to some people that maybe I wouldn't be able to get through my own network. And so leveraging my peer-to-peer interactions, and we just got crazy turnout. I just graduated college, which is kind of crazy to even say out loud. So I'm 22 years old, and I saw people filling out that survey that I hadn't seen or heard from since I graduated in 2017. But that really is the power of social media, and that's the power of having youth facilitated advertisement. And the other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that at the actual day of the event, the way that it was sort of set up, we invited all these, you know, community stakeholders, the people that we felt had the impact to make a difference. These are your town councilors, your school committee members, your administration, chief of police was at this event, big event. The youth were participating at the event. We read stories on behalf of the people who submitted our stories, the respondents. I think in total there are about 60 respondents, 60 stories, and the youth were participating at the event. And furthermore, I think another important point that, you know, I was really, I think, needing to drive home is that it's not like we show up the day of the event as youth, make our mark the day of the event and step away. We're there for the creation of the planning. We're there for the advertisement. We're there for the actual event. And we're also there to interpret data and establish next steps. And so, yeah, I'll just briefly go over some of our outcomes I've already touched on a little bit, but we had 139 survey respondents. Like I was saying, 50% were 24 years old or younger. A local university we sent over the data to them at Bridgewater State University, and they sort of interpreted the data and did a whole sort of study on that and really seeing, okay, we have the data, what does this data mean and what can we do with it from here? And then we established, we're still in this process of establishing meetings with impactful community leaders, so the people that were at the event, and really sort of creating action steps, right? Because the listening event, and to listen is one thing, but to listen and then facilitate change as a result of what you heard is another. And so that's sort of the process that we're in right now, and reaching out to those community leaders and making sure we have good feedback loops for things like this in the future. Yeah, and so some of the primary takeaways, I think something that we've really learned with the listening event was that youth are the closest to some of our most important problems. A lot of the stories, even myself, only 4 years removed from the Bridgewater Rainham High School, was stunned by some of the stories. And I gotta say, it was hard to hear some of the stories, because these are people that you ate lunch with, people that I ran track with, people that, you know, I took math class with. These are people that I was around every day, and I didn't know the things they were going through. And it was hard to hear. And it makes me a little bit emotional talking about it, because you know, you don't want anybody to have to go through traumatic events of discrimination. On a more positive note, I think something that was really beautiful was that, given a safe environment, youth are generally feel empowered to share their ideas. When we first pitched this and we had this idea, I was sort of like, I'm not sure how many people are going to be willing to sort of candidly share these stories, even with the assurance of anonymity and safe spaces, just because they're traumatic. A lot of people, I know this because of personal experience outside of a listening event, but also people said in their stories that they have wanted to completely dissociate from the community and not think about it at all because of some of the things that they went through. And these are, like I said, are people that are right next door. And it was so tough to hear, but it was also, the silver lining was that they came and they shared. And all that was needed was a safe space. All they needed was to be assured that they were going to be heard and something was going to be done about it. I think that what's important though to spotlight with that was that we did share these stories on behalf of the people at the event. Of the 60 people who responded to our surveys, very few, I think there was only 7 or so, were actually willing to tell their story on behalf of themselves at the listening event. And because of that small number, we ended up just reading all of the stories as a DICE board. But I think that tells you a little bit of something as well. The fact that these people, felt comfortable to share to us because we assured a safe space, but not comfortable to share with the community leaders, which I think is telling. And I think that if you wanted to recreate this sort of experiment or this sort of event, that's certainly something you'd have to keep in mind. And so I was proud of us that we were able to create that space for these people. And then again, just something that Liv talked about, I think that including youth in the advertising process increases youth turnout by a mile. I think having a youth tell another youth peer-to-peer, I think you're going to get value out of this experience, or you'd add value to me by participating in this experience. I think you get buy-in. And, I love DICE. I love being a part of DICE. We have great leadership. We have great adult leadership. I can say with almost 100% certainty they wouldn't have got the turnout in youth that they did if the youth didn't, advertise. And so I think that's a huge thing. If you want youth to show up, get other youth to buy in and get other youth to tell them that they should. So I think that's a big thing. And so, yeah, you guys have heard me talk for a little bit now, just a little bit longer. We'll talk a little bit about building youth leadership and what that sort of looks like, particularly with my experience with DICE and what sort of building youth leadership has looked like at DICE. And so I think the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things that has allowed us to succeed at DICE, Liv and I and the 2 other youth advisors that aren't here with us today, is establishing communication. Cleone and Susie, the co-presidents of DICE, are great communicators. They're very good at communicating via many mediums, I guess you could say, whether it be text, whether it be email. We have a running Slack channel, and they've been very open about, let us help you, what works for you, that sort of thing. Because I think that a big obstacle that you could have with facing or trying to communicate with youth, like Liv said earlier, I don't think it would have worked if they were like, okay, the only way we're communicating is through this Facebook page, and maybe the youth have to go create their own new Facebook page, and all of a sudden now they have a Facebook page just to be part of DICE. Like it doesn't work. I think that you have to allow youth to communicate in ways that are efficient and work for them. And so I think that was a big thing. And we've talked a lot about how DICE is impactful and important, but they're not perfect. I think that's something that we could do better at DICE is maintaining relationships. I could be perfectly candid in saying that a year ago when Liv and I started, there were 3 more youth advisors that were in the senior graduating class at Bridgewater Rainham, and they're no longer with us. And I think that part of what we could be doing better is, first of all, losing 3 youth advisors is a big thing, because you've seen what Liv and I have been made possible over the past, X amount of months. It's very important. The buy-in that you can get, the extra advertisement you can get, and the insight that you can get is tremendously. There was a bike in the background. I'm sorry if that interrupted. Is tremendously important. So losing 3 youth advisors is no small thing. And I think that it's even more problematic when you don't know why you lose them. The situation at DICE is really that we had 3 other youth advisors, and we sort of went dark, and we kind of lost them, but we don't really know why. And to me, that's sort of unacceptable. I think that it would be different if the 3 other youth advisors that were with us sort of said, hey, I'm going through the transition from high school to college. I can't really make this time commitment. I think that would be one way of going about it. Obviously, you can't chain someone to an organization. You want someone to be getting value from it. But I think that in a lot of ways, to sort of lose that relationship without understanding why, and just sort of having it go dark without that communication is sort of unacceptable, as I was saying. And so that's something that DICE could definitely do better, because obviously maintaining relationships is extremely important. I think that Liv and I have participated 2 or 3 different events, and we've gotten better with each event, and we've become more insightful with each event. And so the longer that you can get youth to buy in, the better off you are and the better off they are. And another sort of thing I think is extremely important that I've already talked about a little bit is that it's extremely important to acknowledge your bias as an adult. What I sort of mean by that is you need to treat youth as equals. I don't think that the youth to adult relationship works unless you're on an even playing field. You're starting off on the wrong foot. Otherwise, I think that it's extremely important that you start off with equal power, with an equal vote, because otherwise the youth is going to take a backseat naturally. They're going to assume, hey, Cleone, Susie, they've been in industry, they're very professional people. They know a lot more than I do. So I think that if Cleone and Susie didn't make us feel like we had an equal vote and an equal seat at the table, then we'd be taking a backseat. You know what I mean? We'd be much more likely to engage, much less likely to engage, that is. And it's important, that kind of goes along with that, not to dummy down subjects and not to talk down to youth as if you know more than them and starting from that point. Because I think this is something that sometimes we can even do passively. I wouldn't mistake a lack of experience for a lack of understanding and passion, if that makes any sense. And so I think that's an important point to sort of drive home.
And I think that throughout this whole presentation, we've talked a lot about how DICE is a very positive and a very good representation of how to include youth. But I think that on the other side of that, it'd be really beneficial to talk about a different case study and a different group that maybe didn't include youth in the best way. So the BR Expression Session was a local high schools initiative, which was entirely separate from DICE, which attempted to fix some major issues regarding inclusion in the school community. In doing so, it tried to analyze school rules in the handbook, as well as past records to see what was going wrong. And it helped plan inclusion events at the school and made announcements in an attempt to make diversity more commonplace. The product overall was not a great representation of how to incorporate and build youth leadership, and ultimately did little to fix the overall climate of the school, possibly because of that. While good intentioned, the adult organizers failed to find the balance between providing support and structure and taking over the entire project. And I think that looking back, it provides a really good example to learn from. So the mistakes made here can be avoided elsewhere. For one thing, I think it highlighted how beneficial it is to compare the work that your group is doing to the work of other organizations and make those connections. Because maybe if we looked at what other high schools are doing, we would have had a better idea of how to kind of steer clear and make sure that we're doing the most beneficial thing for our school community, and also make connections to how it all fits into the bigger picture and how it's making like a real difference in our community. Because I feel like, especially with youth, we can kind of lose that passion or lose the drive to do something if we don't understand why we're doing it, or we don't understand how it's actually fixing things. So I think that if the BR Expression Session kind of made it like very clear what the goal was in each thing that we were doing, it would have been a more beneficial thing for the school overall. Another important takeaway to remember is to make the main mission as well as the smaller objectives clear, so the youth know how they can truly make an impact. I think a big issue with the BR Expression Session was that there was too many unorganized objectives at the same time, and the youth didn't really know what they were trying to do. So I think that when trying to build youth leadership in your own organizations, it's very important to make sure that you're making every single individual objective clear and just letting the youth figure out how to accomplish those objectives. When you're trying to do too many things at once, it gets very confusing, and then the youth will kind of fall back at that point. And then, like Trey said, you might lose some of those relationships that you had, and it's a lot more difficult to maintain relationships with the youth when they don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it. And again, following up off of what Trey said, it's very important to view the youth as equal partners. I felt like a lot of the times during the BR Expression Session, they viewed the youth as like unable to handle the difficult topics of the school, and they kind of shy away from the big picture of things. And they kind of like, there'd be acts of racism at school, but they wouldn't want to say that, and they wouldn't want to go into that because it'd be too graphic or too difficult to handle. And I feel like that's undermining youth as a whole. And we can really like understand and comprehend and participate in complex discussions. And I think that was a big mistake with the BR Expression Session that we can avoid, and just make sure that, again, like Trey said, like the youth are on an equal platform to you, and you don't view them as less than. And then to kind of recap, we have this nice little do's and don'ts chart to kind of make it very clear, like during each part of the planning process and each part of like making an event or just within the organization, how and how not to include the youth. For example, communication wise, it's a big do to communicate your standards and expectations, tell them what you want from certain events, what you don't want, stuff like that. But it's a don't to force the youth to communicate via one medium. Like Trey said, nobody wants to make a Facebook page just for one thing. If you can communicate via text, via email, all this stuff, that's a really good idea. Event planning wise, it's a big do to provide professional guidance that might come with experience, but don't suppress creativity by doing that, and don't smother the planning process. help in whatever ways you can, but don't try to tell the youth how to do things, and don't kind of push away their ideas. Try to incorporate as many ideas and different perspectives as you can. Teamwork wise, it's really important to establish clear goals and deadlines, but don't oversimplify topics just because they're younger than you. Like I said earlier, with the maintaining clear missions and objectives, it's really, really important that the youth know what they're doing and why they're doing it. But you can go into details about what you're talking about and the actual things that are going on in the world. If someone's old enough to experience something, they're old enough to talk about it and brainstorm ideas to fix it. Recruitment wise, it's a really big do to encourage youth to conduct peer recruitment. And then it's a big don't to rule out leaders because they're too young. A big thing that I think that we've talked about recently is maybe incorporating middle school or even like younger students, because we know what it's like in the high school, but maybe we don't know what it's like in the middle school. And I think that ruling out people because they're too young is a really bad idea, because you don't know what perspective they might bring to the table that you didn't already think of. And then in regards to decision making, a big do is to help you think about how they fit into the bigger picture. Like I said earlier, make sure they know why they're doing it and know how each specific objective is going to help them fix things or make an actual impact in the work that they're doing. And then again, a big don't is to view the youth as a necessary burden on decision making. I feel like a lot of the times people include youth and include kids because they think they have to. They're like, oh, we want kids on our team, we want to do this, we want to do that. But they don't actually incorporate them into the everyday deals. Like Trey said, they're all part of the organization process. In DICE, we're always like working on things and we have like an equal say at the table. We're not just there for show. And I think that's a really important thing to think about when including the youth. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming. Our contact information is on these slides. Again, if you have any questions after this presentation or you just want to reach out and talk, I feel like we're always open to responding. But yeah, I feel like this was really, really beneficial and I really enjoyed speaking here. And I feel so blessed that I was given this opportunity to speak. So yeah, thank you all. Trey, do you want to say anything?
No, just reiterating that. Thank you everybody for being here. And like I said at the top, means a lot.
I think to the participants, the presenters first, thank you very much. I think there are probably many, many questions. The slide on the do's and don'ts made everyone sit up a little bit. So for Trey and Olivia and Jose, I'd say we're open to questions. If we get too many going at the same time, I'll ask you to raise your hands, but we're a small enough group, you should be able to just shout it out. And yeah. Anyone? So I'm interested in your talking, and this will be for Jose too, because I'm sure he faces the same problem, is how you maintain the relationships when you have people in a lot of growth periods of their lives and a lot of transitions happening just normally. So how do you do that? What mechanisms, what tips would you offer? Anyone?
I can speak to that a little bit. I think that particularly for just, I guess we'll really only speak to this personally with what we've experienced with DICE. As I sort of mentioned, the 3 youth advisors that we sort of lost, quote unquote, from DICE were really in that transition period, like you mentioned, going from high school to college. And, you know, I remember the stress of that, applying to schools, getting into schools, figuring out roommate situations, going into college, that sort of thing. I think that some of these sort of extracurriculars can sort of fall by the wayside. I think something that's really critical when I was sort of going into college, I was really looking to sort of build myself up professionally. And maybe that's not an experience that everybody can relate to, but I was very much looking, okay, you know, when I'm making this transition, you know, what do I want out of this transition in my life? And, you know, how can I get there? And so for me, it was sort of, you know, I want to be a respected professional engineer, for instance. And so immediately I sort of looked into, you know, what I can do to bolster myself as an engineer. And I think that you think of the typical things with that sort of thing. You know, I thought, okay, maybe I'll work in a research lab, that sort of thing. The example may seem a little bit abstract, but I think the way that it relates to this sort of work is that I think that what we could do a better job of doing, and what Cleone and Susie at DICE do to a certain degree, is they help us see this as something to build ourselves up. It's not like we are here to build up DICE, even though that is the case. DICE is here to also build up us, and DICE is here to help us. You know what I mean? This gives us professional experiences. So I think that if you can kind of sort of market it to a certain degree as, this is something that could be good for you, not only just you valuing us. I think that's always like a positive thing.
Going off of that, I think it's really important to understand that even with that, sometimes you can't expect specifically the youth, but anybody to maintain the same level of participation at the same time, and kind of not forcing that and allowing people to flow in and out of their levels of participation that they can. I think that's also really important, as well as what it was said within the presentation of the multiple mediums. Like if somebody's not responding to Slack messages or they're not responding to Facebook and you don't really know what's going on, maybe texting them individually and reaching out and stuff like that would be really beneficial. But just like, I feel like the youth specifically don't have to always keep at the same level of participation all the time. And if they need to step back for a moment, I feel like that's not necessarily a bad thing, and they can kind of lessen their participation for a little bit and then come back stronger later when they're ready.
Yeah, that's a great point as well.
Jose?
For me, I could say it two ways. The first way is the empathy. The empathize, the sensibility. In a specific in our
You are frozen, Jose.
Perhaps if he goes to audio only, it would be better.
Sorry, I lost my connection. I will turn off. And in my opinion and my experience, as I say, I think that to connect with the youth people and be sensitive, be empathize with them, it's very important. To understanding their daily life in the social gaps in Mexico, and the second thing that's most important than the first is to understand that, for example, in human rights issues, a fact for us, for the people, I don't know if makes sense for you, is not necessarily a fact for the youth people. Okay, youth people. We cannot a long communication and to keep the youth people in our projects. In these cases, we cannot consider to think a fact on behalf of the youth people. I'm not sure if you are understanding me, but yeah, I think that this is work for us.
Other questions, directions? Okay, we have a question from Eric. Eric, do you want to speak the question yourself, or?
Sure. I've got some background noise. So I was just curious, for leaders looking to improve youth involvement or youth partnership, what is the best way to actually reach that community to attract those youth teammates? And so, for example, how did you find out about DICE?
I know personally I could speak to that. I actually found out about DICE through an Instagram post. And the first thing that went through my brain was like, this would look good on college applications. And I know it seems dumb now because it's become such an important part of my life, but that's genuinely why I joined. And that's genuinely why I started looking into it. And I think that social media in and of itself is a big thing, or working through schools specifically. I know that schools are always looking for like community service things, stuff like that. But if you can include any like youth partnerships that you want to do and have the schools mention it, it'd be a really good thing for kids because that's where they get all their information every day. And I know that I'm on social media like all day, every day. It's like my life. I'm always on my phone. So if you post things on social media and through that, I'm sure that you could get a lot of youth interaction.
Yeah,
Great.
I agree. And yeah,
Yeah,
I can speak.
you'd be a little more specific about social media. So exactly which platforms did you use? I think some people know there is social media, but may not know which ones would be best, just in your context.
My big one personally was Instagram. And I feel like a lot of kids my age specifically are on Instagram and even younger. Snapchat's a big one, but I know that that's kind of harder to use for adults because it's not as much of a profile thing. So you'd have to keep posting or something like that. So I know Snapchat's more difficult, but I know that the two big ones for youth are really Instagram and Snapchat. And then I know that TikTok is rising, and I know it's very difficult for adults to kind of get into and understand. But if you were able to advertise something through that, I think that'd be a really good idea, especially because of how much TikTok is growing. Like it's even affecting the music charts. But I feel like Instagram is like the safest, easiest route. But if you can do Snapchat or TikTok, I think that would be really beneficial as well.
Before we leave this, I think I'm speaking for people. What if I want to do Snapchat or TikTok? What do I need to do today? Download the app and
TikTok, you can make a little video talking about what you're doing and post it. Yeah. If you know any young kids, that might help, because it's TikTok especially is kind of confusing, but it's basically like a 15-second or like a minute-long video. You can just talk about what you're doing, make it interesting, use effects, like do things that would like grasp youth attention. And then Snapchat is kind of, I guess, a middleman. You just kind of, like for this event, we have like that little poster thing. If you could just post that, and then advertise your Snapchat on your other social media platforms. So like advertise your Snapchat on your Instagram or even on Facebook and stuff. Facebook isn't really as big anymore, but I know that it's kind of a safe route for everybody. And I feel like it's more of a professional outlet than other things. But yeah, I think that you could definitely utilize all of them.
okay. And one more quick question. I don't believe we used TikTok for this conference. Would that have been a good idea in your judgment?
I think it would have. Actually, I think that a lot of kids see things on TikTok. I know that like I see like a recipe, I'm like, I'm gonna try that, and I save it. And you can like save things really easily on TikTok. And I think that if you were able to make a really good video advertising this conference, I think it would have gotten a lot of youth interaction and youth participation.
Okay, we will take that message back, at least for ourselves. But thank you for, and just I think sometimes we say things and you don't always know that the other person doesn't have the same information and experiences that you do. So lesson learned. Other questions?
Yeah. Where is DICE and where is it located? What geographic area can you work in? How can we use it in our neighborhood?
Yeah, I could speak to us a little bit. So our specific nonprofit organization, we operate, as I was mentioning throughout the PowerPoint, Bridgewater, Rainham, but that's part of Massachusetts, United States, Northeast, and we have been working primarily just in our community. I know there's other groups that we sort of work with. There's a town a couple times over that has a youth group in a town called Easton, and so we've kind of shared ideas there. But our sort of range and impact is felt in the Bridgewater Rainham community. But I think that it's a model that's can be replicated, because really its sort of genesis was just out of wanting to do good things in the community, and involving youth is such a big part of that. And so we're not big. There's 12 board members, and we have different people who volunteer here and there, and we have a board meeting once every someone correct me if I'm wrong, but 3 or 4 weeks, something to that effect, on Thursday nights, where we come together and we hear and we share ideas, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's really sort of our format and how we operate. I don't know if that gets at your question, but.
So we have a question for Jose and Trey and Olivia. What's the accomplishment you're most proud of? Jose, let's start with you.
Well, we are very happy to be the first organization in the kind of organization in education and human rights in our city, to speak about human rights, because our city is very a conservative place that usually create fake news about human rights in general, not about one topic in general, about in all the topics of the human rights. So since 2013, we have been made possible to open very important discussions and public discussions with the social media, with the journalists, with the newspapers, with a lot of our allies that we have helped us to improve our impact. And yeah, we are totally proud to be the first organization in our area. And it is not, and it's not for our ego, but it's really in the comfort zone, and always we have lived in our area in comparison that other violence zones in Mexico, because our state is the most safety state in Mexico. And also our city is one of the most peaceful cities in the world, Mérida City. We are very proud to join the youth people to the discussions of the issues in human rights that maybe in the past had never talked about. Yes, this is our achievement that we are very proud of that.
That's really powerful. Trey and Olivia, what are you most proud of?
I know my big one was our Meet the Candidates event. I feel like it doesn't seem as big after hearing that, but I was just really proud because I felt like it was much more like started by just the youth and as DICE as a backbone. And it was like the first time where I feel like I really kind of did something, and I had like a big part in making an event like actually happen. And it was stressful, and it wasn't like the easiest thing in the world, but I felt like after it was all said and done, it was really beneficial, especially the connections that I made with everybody. I know that like the week or two after, I actually went and volunteered at the voting place, and I like helped clean all the booths and stuff, and I got to meet like a lot of the candidates face to face, and like talking to them and the connections that I made there, like, I don't know, it's just something that I don't think I'll ever forget. And I was really proud of us for actually being able to pull it all off.
Yeah, similarly for me, I think that I'm very proud of being here with all of you, honestly, to be sort of recognized on this level, and to be presenting alongside someone like Jose, who's done such great work in such far away parts of the world. And even leading up to this conference, just getting emails from people who were in, Sweden and all around the world, kind of feeling like you're at that table is kind of overwhelming. And it's a testament, I think, to the work that we've been able to do at DICE and also as a youth group. And I think that if I had to speak a little bit more specifically, it would probably be the listening event that I talked about during our actual presentation, just because I felt like that was a big challenge to get people to share candidly about traumatic stories. and to be able to, in what I hope will be a positive impact for the people in our community, be able to positively impact my peers, I think is a great thing. I think that, I guess just making it personal, as an engineer, I think that part of what I do as an engineer is I like to think about making the world a better place. More specifically, I do work with like carbon capture, environmental mitigation, and a lot of that, what I do on a day-to-day basis is bringing it back to trying to do work that I'm proud of, and trying to do work that my grandparents will be proud of, that my mom will be proud of, that my kids someday will hopefully be proud of. And I think that starting locally and then even just being recognized on this scale within the year that we've been doing this has just been a really humbling process. And yeah, I'm proud of us, and of course, crazily thankful to everybody who's been a part of the process.
Other questions? We have two of the DICE co-presidents, Cleone and Susie. Would you like to add anything here?
I know Cleone was at her daughter's softball game, so I don't know if she's available too.
Susie. Yeah, she's there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, everybody. Cleone Mainville. I am just incredibly proud and humbled to have both Liv and Trey represent DICE and be an integral part of our board. And as you can see from this presentation, I'm sorry, I was exercising a little bit between games, so I'm a little winded. Just really proud that they have taken this invitation to join our board and created it into something that one would serve them and serve the community as a whole. Something that is really important to us here at DICE is that we don't believe that being in service to the community should necessarily be a selfless role where you're dedicating a lot of time and energy and then the experience passes. We really feel strongly about developing leaders, developing resumes, developing skills that can translate into professional roles so that there can be impact way beyond DICE. And Susie and I have always been in step that our role is to replace us, right? If DICE falls and falters because there is no Susie and there is no Cleone, we have failed. And so we do everything in the spirit of elevating our board members, replicating ourselves, and being very generous around developing everybody on our board and making sure that there is an exchange for themselves, both professionally as well as to advance our community. So I'm so incredibly proud. I'm so incredibly grateful that you didn't hear from us until Fran invited us into this conversation. This is our youth leaders, speaking on behalf of us, on behalf of themselves, and I'm just incredibly proud. So thank you for inviting us. Thank you for listening. And thank you for acknowledging and appreciating the work of our youth.
Hi, this is Susie. I'm not really sure what else I could possibly add after just this wonderful presentation. Thank you everyone for this opportunity, and tremendous gratitude to Trey and Olivia. What an absolute pleasure to work alongside these amazing humans. And just listening to this, I don't even think we fully understood the impact and what you all gained. And so for me, it's actually very moving because this work is not always easy. We have a lot of tough days being advocates where people don't agree with or don't care. And so it's really, really rewarding to hear this. Just as an individual who, and I realize, working alongside with other individuals who do put in a lot of their personal time into this. So, that payback that Cleone is mentioning, while it's intended, it's great to hear when some of it comes to fruition. So really proud of you all, and what an amazing journey it's been with you. So I don't think it's over yet. So I appreciate, taking this moment in time to reflect on it. So congrats to both of you, and, for everyone else who collaborated in these events. And it really has been appreciated by so many others in the community from the feedback that we hear. So hats off. Thanks.
I'd like to take a moment here to just acknowledge the ways that these connections get made. So first of all, I think the ability to connect within Bridgewater, and then for Lauren Kafar, who's on the planning team, to say, oh, I know another group that's in a similar community, but they're in Mexico, and I'll connect you with Jose. And so we have him integrated. And as a side, and so Lauren, thanks very much. But as an aside now, I think, Jose, you need to organize a time when Trey and Olivia can visit virtually with your group and learn how you dove into the human rights issues. How do you speak about those in the community? And so that's that. And in the Bridgewaters, I'd like to give a special shout out to the Bridgewaters Rotary Club, who became a sponsor for this, and to the Edward W. Minnick Institute for Global Engagement at Bridgewater State University, under the direction of Wing Kai To, who's on this, and they are a partner. So Bridgewater is all in on this. I couldn't have said that 3 years ago. And it's groups like DICE, it's groups like BCCR, another one, the university being there, everyone came together, and it will continue. I'm using that as an example. And then as we made this proposal, then Lauren added Jose and that group, and it just gets bigger. I dare say there are others who couldn't be with us today, but they wrap around the world. And so, like Susie said, this is just the beginning. So. Anyone else?
I may chime in for just a minute.
Please.
I live in the Pacific Northwest, about an hour from Seattle, and we're in the process of working with some folks to establish an annual peace conference in this area. And we're looking for a very diverse representation from not only peace builders who are working towards peace and harmony in so many ways, but people who are interested in becoming peace builders. And a very important part of that diversity is inclusion of young people. So we are determined to outreach and attract as many young folks as we want, as we can, to join us in this journey, and not only to give them a seat at the table, but to give them a voice and empower them to be part of the process. So what I've heard today is very inspiring and giving me a lot of good ideas. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's great to
put your contact information in the chat, and then others who want to be connected with you can do that, either to attend or participate in your conference.
Okay, I can certainly do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that for me makes it worth it. If I can add value to other people's lives and add value to this space, that's fantastic. Yeah, so in any way going forward, I'm sure I speak for Liv and I and the rest of the youth advisory at DICE as well. Any way that we can add value to that process in another part of our country, completely willing. So that's awesome to hear that you're doing that.
Kim, have you set a date for that conference, or is it still an idea?
Let's see, I'm not muted. Okay. We're looking for November.
Okay.
And that could fly, but we're hoping we can do something in November. And I'm in the process of putting my email address in chat now. I hope it works.
Great. Kai, if you don't mind actually speaking your message so people don't miss it. Really important. If that works for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to suggest that we can look at the local community in Massachusetts and try to understand how we're doing it at the grassroots and community level. And we also have Seattle here, we have Mexico, and we know that there are many organizations that are doing great work. So one of the movement to make it bigger is to really work together and learn from each other. So there are dozens of groups in Massachusetts and all over the US. And so
Right.
hopefully DICE and other groups can continue to think about how we can collaborate.
Are there any specific groups you'd mentioned just offhand for Jose and Trey and Olivia?
No, all the anti-racism organizations over the last year, and Cleone and Susie are well aware of that. So
Right. Okay. Thanks.
thank you.
Mhm. Other questions or comments? Okay. I would invite you to attend the rest of the sessions and through the rest of this day. And we wrap up, I think, around 7 p.m. tonight. This afternoon in Bridgewater, there'll be a Juneteenth celebration for the first time publicly. And so if you're in the Bridgewater area, please come. And if you're not, please think about us because it's a very important day that we have now as a national holiday. So, thank you everyone for being on the call. Unless there are further questions, we will close out and give you a little break. But thank you, presenters especially, and everyone who made those connections for us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. All the best to each of you.
Thank you, Fran. Wonderful presentation, Juan Pablo.
It's great.
Yeah.
Gracias. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Jose.
Gracias. Gracias. Thank you.
Gracias.
Sorry, Jose Pablo.
Jose, Trey, and Olivia, great job. Great presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being kind of our anchor back there. It's great. Great. Cleone and Susie, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Catch you later.
So you can turn your fan back on, Francis.
No, not yet. Actually, it became quite comfortable, so it wasn't a problem.
Good.
No, it's
Good.
just, yeah.
Well, I'll close it out then.
Yeah, I think we can do that. Thank you.